Raider Nation, it's time. This is the Raiders Squad. Sponsored by Gametime. Everything Las Vegas Raiders every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Death Star in the desert. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Commitment to excellence starts here. The Raiders Squad Show starts now.
Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another edition of the Raider Squad Show right here on the Locked On Network. Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, you can follow us on our social media channels, and you'll see in the description below the ways that you can find us. Remember, this is only the third episode, so if you're liking the content, you like the show, we're going to be on Monday and Wednesdays at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. That's 10:30 Eastern time, and it's for all Raider Nation haters, whatever Raider content, we got you covered right here. And we're going to get into some great debates. I'm joined alongside Lincoln Kennedy, also Q Myers, and we're going to get into a lot on this show. But before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, coming up on the show, we are going to get into a couple of trade rumors. There might be a former Raider that's being eyed by Las Vegas. We'll get into that. We're also going to break down the schedule and give our predictions for this season. But first, we're going to start off, guys, and this is really interesting because there's been a lot of hype on one of the Raiders draft picks. Of course, Ashton Jeanty is Ashton Jeanty, but Darien Porter, he's receiving a lot of hype. Some people are calling him a generational talent, and I feel like it's a little bit too soon for that. But, it's kind of exciting because I think one of the questions leading into this season was what's up with the secondary, right? There were a few losses that the Raiders saw some players leave. So right now, Darien Porter, some people are saying that he's going to be a starter. Let's break it all down. We'll start off with you, Q. All this Darien Porter hype. Do you believe he's a generational talent, or do you feel like we got to pump our brakes a little bit?
Yeah, I think we need to pump our brakes when it comes to generational talent with a lot of these players, right? I mean, that's a huge word right there, generational talent. But as many people know in Raider Nation, I always say DBs win games, right? And so he's a big-time defensive back as far as the size he has, the speed that he possesses, and the fact that he is a prototypical Pete Carroll-looking defensive back. Like if you looked at the Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom, you see guys that measure up to what Darien Porter is. 6'4", runs a 4.3. Right? He's long, he's lengthy. Now, the thing about it is, and I've said this ever since the Raiders drafted him, one, I'm a big fan of Iowa State players, period. I think Matt Campbell does a hell of a job there preparing his players for the National Football League. If you look across the league, all the Iowa State guys that are currently in the league, like a Brock Purdy, like a Breece Hall, the Houston Texans drafted two Iowa State wide receivers this past year, right? There's plenty of Iowa State representation in the league, so I think Matt Campbell does a great job there. With Darien Porter, he's just young at the position. He was a former wide receiver, so he hasn't played it a lot, and he's trying to still learn it. But who's better to learn it from than a guy who that's his calling card? Pete Carroll is a defensive back. So I think he has the opportunity at OTAs and mandatory minicamp. He was running as a starter, and I put that in air quotes because it's just, like Lincoln says all the time, basically glorified 7-on-7 right now. But I still think that's notable that you see him ahead of a guy like Jacorian Bennett. You see him out there with a guy like Eric Stokes, ahead of a guy like a Cam Richardson. So obviously the Raiders have high hopes for him. He's got to learn the position, and he's got to learn all aspects of the position because Pat Graham likes to do multiple different things as a defensive coordinator. So he's going to have to learn everything about that position. But he's young. The one thing about he did at Iowa State was go and track the ball. And as Lincoln knows, the Raiders haven't had a guy consistently track the ball in a while. So if he can turn into that guy, the Raiders could have them a gem.
I think you guys, you have to refer back to the great Public Enemy song when Flavor Flav says, "Don't give in to the hype. Don't believe the hype." Right?
Don't believe the hype.
Here's the thing. I'll say this: I don't know much about Darien, and I think he'll be good. I'm hoping that'll be good, obviously, for the Raiders' standpoint. But the big thing is that when you make the transition from college to this league, it can be, you can get starstruck. You can be awed. I remembered my very first play. I was beat by Chris Mims. He went around me so quickly, I thought he was going to go through me. He went around me so quickly, I didn't even blink. And I was like, oh, This is the speed of the NFL. So you got to get used to that. And it's really hard to duplicate that in practice. So you got to wait to game time speed. But with that being said, as Q so pointed out, his intangibles are great. Size, strength, speed. Those are the intangibles that get you noticed. Those are the intangibles that get you in. Now your play has to take over. And I matched that hand in hand, guys, with the scheme that Patrick Graham is going to institute with this defense, because, we'll break it down as the season goes along. Some guys play better man, some guys play better zone, regardless of what it is and how you want to see your strategy sort of develop. And then you have to put all the other pieces together. So I'm excited for the young man because potentially on paper, he looks good, but paper don't win games, guys. People win games. So you got to go out there and play.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit unfair for Darien Porter as well. You got to remember, he's a young guy. He hasn't actually been playing, corner for a very long time. He used to be a wide receiver, transitioned into a corner, which obviously that happens, but he's got the size. I think he ran like a 4.3. He's got the speed. So he's going to be a little bit of, a taller corner as well. He's listed as 6'3", 6'4", I believe. I think you said 6'4", Q. Mm-hmm. So I think size-wise and potential-wise, the ceiling is really high. We've seen what Pete Carroll can do with guys that, are coming into the league as a corner. And also the only thing that I kind of had questions about is his tackling. Like in all the footage that I've seen in all the games that he's plays, he's not the best tackler, but I feel like that's like an effort thing. And so I'll go to you for that, Link. When it comes to tackling and you're trying to be a good tackler, is that just all effort? Or obviously there was some skill to it as well, but if you're not the best tackler, how do you kind of go about that and navigate that?
Well, there are schemes out there, Chantel and Q, that purposely put exposed corners on the perimeter to force them to tackle. You have to learn how to tackle. So it's an absolute essential in this day and age for corners to learn how to tackle. But more times than not, it's off of effort and learning technique. You got to remember, sometimes in college programs, these guys don't have a lot of time because they're mandatory hours. They don't have a lot of time to teach the dynamics. Coaches assume when guys come out of high school, they've got a certain skill set. And much to, with Darien Porter talking about making a transition from wide receiver to cornerback, that's two entirely different skill sets. Learning how to run routes as opposed to learning how to cover and mirror guys. So there are times where there's a learning curve that has to be built in there. With that being said, most of it is mental. How much do you want to get involved in this tackle? Do you want to throw your body in? Are you going to keep your head up? Are you going to use a proper technique to make a tackle, especially when it comes down to it? So that's more of the intangible that comes mental. You have to learn the game as you push on, right, Q?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, it is. It's about getting in there, learning the technique, and having the willingness too. That's something that we saw a lot, Lincoln, from multiple, Raider quarterbacks in the past, where they haven't had the willingness to really get in there, get dirty, and tackle. And that's what the greats, they don't hesitate to get in there and make that tackle and stop the run, right? I mean, it's one thing to be able to, defend the pass, but, when the running back's coming around the corner and you're one-on-one out there, you got to be able to get them to the ground. So, yeah, it's a lot of technique. It's a lot about, effort. And again, since you're moving from the wide receiver position where you're trying not to get tackled, and now you have to do the tackling, it is a learning curve for Darien Porter.
And just want to add a little bit to that before we move on. You got guys like in this league, like Derrick Henry, who's a force. And he's a big guy. So when he comes around, and even by reputation, much like it was back in Seattle for Marshawn Lynch, even by reputation, there are guys that are going to be a little reluctant or a little hesitant. And that reluctancy, that slow sort of thinking about it, that kills you because it's over. That's how fast the league moves. So much to Q's point and much of what I'm trying to say is that there's a desire. You have to have proper technique. You have to execute proper technique, but you have to really like you said, you have to be willing to throw your body into it.
Yeah. And you know what? This is why this show is perfect, because when it comes to tackling, I can ask you guys. The only thing I know about tackling is on Madden, and I hate when I miss a tackle. You know what I mean? That's when I get mad. So I do want to ask, because, the Raiders, obviously, they have some changes in the secondary, and we got into it in the last episode. But, when you lose a guy like Nate Hobbs and the secondary is looking different, Darien Porter has a chance to be a starter. Now, I want to ask you, if you're a quarterback like a Patrick Mahomes, a Bo Nix, and you see, a corner that's a rookie, right? I feel like you're a little bit of a target, and they're going to try to go for it against you, right? So when Darien Porter is going to be in those type of situations, if he is a starter, or even if, he's going to be playing in the game, how do you think he'll navigate those situations? And then also taking into account that there's so much pressure on him. Like when you hear things like generational talent, he's going to be next up for, Pete Carroll, a guy that he's going to transform. Like, what do you think goes through his mind mentally? Also knowing that, quarterbacks are going to be trying to look at him as a target.
Yeah, I don't think that he has to. He can't listen to that kind of stuff. What he's got to do is just work on him. He's got to work on his craft, learn what he has to do, and try to make the best of it. That's it. I look, Lincoln knows better than I do, but I don't think that there's one guy in that Raiders secondary that's not going to be a target this upcoming year, right? Because I think there's a lot of unproven. Right, Eric Stokes, even though he was a former first-round pick, he's been injured most of his career. DeCam Richardson got thrown into the deep end last year, and there was a lot of times that he was sinking instead of swimming, right, even though he got a lot of reps under his belt, which is going to help him. Right, Porter, just a first-time, first-time DB. Still learning the position, right? Jacorian Bennett was playing at a high level, but then he got injured. He hasn't been able to finish one season yet so far in his career. I don't think that there's anyone in the secondary that's proven where they're not going to be targeted. I think if you're Patrick Mahomes, you get out there and you're licking your chops saying, yeah, I'm going to test these guys and see what they've got.
It's many answers to parts of this question, in my estimation, guys. The thing is that if I'm a coach or I'm a quarterback, hell yeah, I'm going to try the new guys. I'm going to try them every which way I can because I want to see what they can do. I want to put some stuff on film so I can learn what their strengths or their weaknesses are. So that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, he's going to be tested. He's going to be tested early. He's going to be tested often. The second way of looking at it is from his standpoint, how much can I absorb or as a player? Can I take this challenge that I'm learning from one of the best, Pete Carroll? I've been try to be a part of a defense, try to duplicate a defense like they had in Seattle with their success. Or do I? And the thing is, guys, when you're playing this game at this level, this speed, you have to have a short memory.
Yep.
You're going to get beat.
Yep.
The guys on the other side of the ball get paid too. So you're going to get beat. And when it comes to a position like corner, because there are so many intangibles and the chips are stacked against you in the secondary, you look at the rules, you get defensive holding, illegal contact, pass interference. Everything is worked against you. They want the offense to succeed. The NFL wants the offense to succeed because they think that's going to put people in the seats. That's going to get people excited. If everybody shuts down everything, nobody really gets excited about a 7-6 game. You see what I'm saying? Those types of things. So, yeah, he's going to be tested, and it's up to him to try to take the challenge and better himself when it comes to, look, there's sometimes I'm going to win, there's sometimes I'm going to lose, but how overall can I get better? And I've told my sons and I've told people that I play with, you got to have a very short memory. Things are going to happen. Bounce back, recover. And one of the rules that I live by when I play, guys, I said I will never get beat by the same move twice.
Right.
Once you hit me, okay. Oh, you got you got that in your arsenal. Okay,
right.
Okay, I'm coming back. But I'm not going to get beat by the same move twice. I'm going to remember that move, and I'm going to defend that move because there's a chance it's going to come up because you already had success. So I know you're going to come back to it. So, but you never get beat by the same move twice. It's all about the individual and how they take on the challenge of being on this level.
I'm glad you said that, Lincoln, when you said, you don't get beat by the same play twice or just you can't do that. That's something that Pete Carroll pointed out during OTAs and mandatory minicamp when he was talking about not only Porter, but some other rookies as well. They're not making the same mistake. They're learning from that one mistake because there's no doubt about it. It's inevitable. They're going to make mistakes. But as long as they learn from that, as long as they learn, okay, that's the double move that I got to watch out for. Oh, that's what I got to pay attention to. Okay, now I got to lock in here. I got to pay attention to the footwork. Like there's so many little small, tips that they could pick up even before the ball is snapped that they can learn what's going on. But yeah, when Pete Carroll said that, he said they're not making the same mistake twice. Now, again, that was just in, helmets and T-shirts and shorts and, no pads and any of that stuff. So obviously it ramps up when it's training camp, but that was a good sign, at least to hear from the head coach.
In terms of him being a young player and obviously having all of this hype on him, I feel like one of the positives, though, guys, is the fact that he is going to probably get a lot of reps in the secondary. How much of an advantage do you think that will be moving forward, and just in terms of him getting experience as a rookie?
I think that's intangible,
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Right? I just think it's everything. Right, you've got to get the reps. I mentioned DeCam Richardson a couple times, and I know a lot of Raider Nation was down on him last year, and I understand why. Right? He had a rough rookie year. He was thrown into the fire when Jacorian Bennett went down and said, "All right, rookie, you're up. You got to be the guy." And well, at first he was injured to start the season off, and then he got into the action, and it was sink or swim. And like I mentioned, a lot of times he sunk, but he got valuable reps that you cannot get. You're not going to get those in practice. You're going to get some reps, but you're not going to get game reps in practice. So if anything, it just helped him with the speed of the game. So I think the more reps that you see Darien Porter, Jacorian Bennett, D. Cam Richardson, Eric Stokes, all those guys get, it's just going to help those guys get better.
Without a doubt. I echo what Q's saying, is that the more reps you have, the better you can be, because you can't make the club in the tub, and you can't get that game speed if you're sitting on a sideline with a clipboard. It doesn't work like that. You have to be out there. You have to get reps. You have to take your lumps, and you have to find a way to bounce back with it, but back from it. The key is this is what comes in the coaching in my format and my mindset, guys, because coaching has to create a scheme that complements the strengths of the guys you have on the football field. Not everybody's the same. This is not a cookie cutter league in that sense. Everyone has certain strengths. Other people have weaknesses. People get exposed in space. People can play tight end coverage, things like that. So these are things, but you don't know that until you're out there playing the football game. That's why to echo Q's point, the more reps you have, the better off you can be.
Yeah, and Darien Porter is definitely going to be getting those reps, and it's really good for him because being a third-round pick, having all that hype, the more reps that he gets, the more chances he's going to have to be able to prove himself. But just, a lot of pressure on a young guy, and I'm really excited and kind of anxious to see him out on the field. Coming up next on the Raider Squad Show, we are going to take a look at the regular season schedule and give you our predictions. So keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer as you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and at a low price guarantees that takes the worry out of buying. And honestly, every time I want to go to a game out of nowhere, especially a baseball game, recently I actually saw, the A's in Sacktown, and tickets were mad cheap just because I waited until the last second to get it. I used the Gametime app and it was awesome. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute ticket, lowest price guaranteed. All right, guys. So we got to take a look at the Raiders schedule, because one of my favorite parts before anyone gets into the regular season, preseason action, is going through the complete schedule and obviously making some predictions. Now, the first thing I want to say is, in terms of betting, I think Vegas has Raiders at 7.5. Right. And you can go the over under, and we're going to be taking a look at that as well. But I think 7.5 is pretty fair for the Raiders, just in terms of, where they were at last year. We're not really going to get into the preseason. We're going to go right into the regular season and start off with week 1, guys. And, this is a team where every time I see their name, I think Tuck Rule right away. They're going to be at New England week 1. This is a 10 a.m. game, right on the West Coast. And I always feel like I've always disliked the Raiders playing a 10 a.m. game. I don't know what it is. I'm very superstitious. But week 1 at the Patriots, we'll go with you, Link. Is this a W or an L? How are you thinking?
Well, first of all, let me put to rest. There are a lot of people who get caught up in that very superstition that you talked about, the time change. I don't think it exists. I think it's more mental or perception, but I don't think it exists. The reason why, more times than not, we travel pretty cushy when we go on the road. We travel pretty good. We have our own plane. We write our own schedule. And in the past, there's been different coaches done it different ways. But in the past, the Raiders, especially when I was alive, he said if we ever had to change time zones, we're leaving on Friday. So you have your normal week of practice. So you build up, you leave on Friday. You get there, you get settled, might have a walkthrough on Saturday. I played for coaches that did that on Saturday, or rest, ready for the Sunday game. So you make the transition. I know about people talk about, scientifically with your body clock and stuff. I get it, but it really isn't that big of a deal. People play it more mental. It's like guys used to have the misconception when they went to Denver, like, I can't breathe. I can't. Slow your breath down. You can breathe. Relax. It's going to be okay. So it's more mental. With that being said, just in focus with New England. Tough game because this is a tough team the Raiders are going to face, a young and energetic team. And Mike Vrabel is going to have them pumped up. Going back to his place where he may have had his success as a player, they're going to be fired up. So this is going to be a tough team. But it's really hard to gauge, and this is why I always have an issue with playing the schedule game. You don't know what you don't know. Right. You don't know the product that's going to be out there. You don't know if they gel. Q and I talked extensively last year when the Raiders started their season because they had mixed so many combinations with their offensive line. They never got into a rhythm. I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it doesn't. I hope there's a level of consistency, but we don't know. But to answer the question, this is a 50-50 game for me, because you don't know where the Raiders are. You don't know where the Patriots are. In the first game of the season, you always have all the hype and the anticipation from the fans, from TV and everything that can't wait. Sometimes you get the worst football that you're going to see, depending on the status and how they came through the preseason. But I honestly think, from what I've seen so far, out of the OTAs, out of this team, about Pete Carroll, both teams are going to be fired up to go out there and hit somebody. They can't wait to get the gear on and hit someone else. So this is going to be a physical game, but it might be a sloppy game. I think it's a toss-up. I want to give the Raiders an edge, but starting on the road, the beginning of the season, is difficult. It is. That stadium is going to be packed. It's going to be sold out. Everyone's excited for football. They can't wait to get back in it. So the Raiders are going to have their intangibles worked against them. I give them a slight edge because I think their special teams are better than the Patriots.
I like it. I like the breakdown, and I agree with everything that Big Link just said. And when I was kind of going through the schedule and looking at this, I looked at the quarterbacks, and I've always been told if you have a quarterback, you have a chance, right? Sure. And so I look at the quarterbacks. Drake May going into year 2. He didn't play the full entire his rookie year, so I feel like he's still learning the position. Mike Vrabel's his new head coach now. Josh McDaniels, Raider fans may know about him, is the offensive coordinator there back in New England. So obviously he's probably going to try to have him dialed up and ready to go and get back at his former team. The being on the road part is a little bit difficult to start off the season, but just because I think that Geno Smith is going to be a little bit further ahead of the curve as far as knowing what he's doing, even though he's learning a new system as well under Chip Kelly, I give the slight edge, like Lincoln does, to the Raiders, but it's on the road, so it is a toss-up. But if you're starting to look at the first handful of games, I like their chances in this one. So I rocked with the Raiders on this one. I gave them a 1-0 start.
Yeah, and also I feel like week 1 is always kind of weird. Like we never really know what the teams are actually like in week 1. So I like your guys' pick, giving the edge to the Raiders. Week 2, they're at home. It's a Monday nighter against a divisional rival in the Chargers. We'll go with you again, Link. Who do you have winning this one?
That's going to be a tough one. Unfortunately, I got to go with the Chargers. I think with their defense and the intangibles that we don't know about the Raiders' offense so far, this could be a tough game for them to get into a rhythm. I think the crowd's going to be fired up. The nation's going to represent. There's no doubt about it. Allegiance should be sold out. But this is a tough task because the Chargers already have a year under their belt of their scheme, both sides of the ball. And last year, they were a pretty damn good defense, too. So there's a lot of intangibles. I give them a slight edge. And when it comes to Q, I know he'll break down the quarterback play. You regardless of how you feel about Justin Herbert, he's still a solid quarterback. And they, as I said, they've got a scheme. The Raiders have got to put a number of things together, especially slowing down the run game, because hardball football, he wants to run, control the pace of the game. And that could be a strain for the Raiders, because if they start off the season struggling, guys, and struggling to score points, then there's a sense of urgency or a sense of panic that might set into where, as Chip Kelly's like, I got to call a game, I got to keep up, I got to keep the pace with the other team. And that becomes a struggle. So I'm going to give the edge to the Chargers in game 2.
Yeah, the funny thing about it is when I look at the Chargers on the schedule, I always feel like the Raiders are going to split with them. I just feel pretty comfortable that it's always going to be a split. So I always say, hey, look, you pick one. Which one do you think? Which one are they going to win? Are they going to win the first time they play the Raiders or the second time? But I'm with Lincoln. I think this is going to be tough. I think Allegiant Stadium is going to be lathered up. It's going to be fired up. I know I'll be excited to be there. It's Monday Night Football. It's the season home opener, but it is tough. And coming off a tough road game that you just played the New England Patriots, most likely, again, I'm giving the Raiders a split with the Chargers. I'll go ahead and say that right now. So I'll pick the Chargers to win this one, which obviously means I'm picking the Raiders to win the next one when they travel to SoFi and play them later in the season.
Yeah, I always usually pick the Raiders to split between the Chargers and the Broncos, not so much the Kansas City Chiefs the last few years, but nonetheless, that's definitely a good pick. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a Monday nighter, nationally televised, a lot of eyes on the Raiders, which is good. So we'll see what happens in that one. Week 3, they're going to be in Washington, and this is a team that's on the come up, right? Jaden Daniels. We also see how their defense was, and they're on the come up. This is a tough game, another 10 a.m. game. And I know you said that's not a big deal, but like as a girl that bets, I stay away from that.
Hey, you got to take it all into consideration. You got to do what you got to do. Do your own homework, your own research. You got to go with your feel, especially when it comes to gambling.
Exactly, right. All right, so Q, we'll go with you. How do you have the Raiders? Do you have the Raiders winning this one on the road?
No, I don't. I have the Raiders losing this one to the Commanders. Jaden Daniels going into year 2. I mean, there's always the question, will he take a step back from what he did his rookie year? But look, he had this team one game away from the Super Bowl, right? So, I mean, I just think that especially being at home in D.C., I think that the Commanders fans are going to be so fired up, and Jaden Daniels is going to be ready to do his thing. It's going to be a huge test for the defense. But, the one thing I'll say, and a lot of Raider Nation is saying, how can the Raiders make the playoffs in year 1? And I always say that that's a P word that I'll talk about when we get there. When we get to that point, they've got to prove themselves. That's how you get there. You win the games that you may not expect to win. Like, they won't be favored in this game at all. Like you said, you do some betting, they're not going to be favored in this game. You go win that one. It's almost like the Baltimore game, week 2 last season. They went into the belly of the beast and they beat the Ravens when nobody expected them to beat the Ravens. Then you build off that. So you win the 50-50 games, as Lincoln pointed out. You win the games that you're supposed to win. And then all of a sudden you pull off a win here or there that you might not be expected to win. This would be one of those, in my opinion, against the Commanders and Jaden Daniels. So I have Washington winning it. But if they are going to be one of those teams that, goes from not being a playoff team, a 4-win team, and all of a sudden they find their way into the playoffs, it's by winning games like this in week 3.
I'll make 2 quick points. From a betting angle, I do expect Jaden Daniels to have a little bit of a sophomore slump. Just so you guys know out there. I think it's going to happen. Teams are going to get familiar with what he's capable of and try to defend his strengths and maybe make him alter his game a little bit. So I do think that's coming. But for this game specifically, I got to give the advantage to the Commanders. This is a very young, energetic team that has got some promising players at positions that may exploit some of the Raiders' undefined weaknesses right now. And most notably, it's their blitz package. And until I see this offensive line perform and Geno Smith deal with they're going to press the receivers to take away the early routes, and they are going to blitz. They're going to find a way to generate pressure. They did it last year. That was one of the reasons they had so much success as they pushed through the season. They're going to do it again this year. And I think that's a big intangible for me, guys. I have to see the way the Raiders are going to handle it. And the fact that you're back on the road, it's loud and everything else. And see how our young players, much like the week 1 in New England, how do you respond to that environment, that hostile environment, being in a place like this on this level, knowing that TVs and everybody's watching? It's a little bit different than the college aspect, no matter where you play. But with that being said, I got to give the advantage to the Commanders.
All right. And then they're back at home week 4 against the Chicago Bears. This is going to be a very interesting matchup when it comes to the quarterback matchup, but also defensively. I thought Chicago had quite the defense last year, some changes this year. How are you guys rolling with this game? Q, will go with you again to start.
I like this one for the Raiders at home against Chicago. I know Ben Johnson is the hot name out there. That was the guy that everybody wanted, that had a head coaching opening. They all wanted to hire him. He ends up picking Caleb Williams and the Bears. I think he's still going to be kind of in that first 4 weeks of the season where a lot of teams treat it as the preseason, where they're still trying to learn. They're trying to install. Caleb Williams is a guy that was sacked the number 1 amount of times in 2024, 68 times. So, he has a tendency to hold on to the ball and try to do a little too much. Now, with that being said, Geno Smith was number 2 last year, so take that for what it's worth. But Caleb Williams was number 1 as far as taking sacks. I think that the Raiders defense makes a few plays here that frustrates Caleb Williams, and I like the Raiders getting this game at home.
I'm going to go with a slight edge with the Raiders again, mainly because of special teams. I think there's going to be intangible there. Look, the Raiders have to show me that they can defend against a mobile quarterback. They had a solid plan last year, as Q pointed out, when they went to Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. But Lamar Jackson tends to get a little frazzled or a little frustrated, pressed when he thinks he has to make all the plays. And I sort of think that's where Caleb Williams is, as all the attention came on him being the overall, number one draft choice, so on and so forth. But with that being said, I give the slight edge to the Raiders, mainly because of the special teams. I think the special teams can make a difference in both the punt return and punt game, flipping the field. And then more importantly, but I want to see them corral a mobile quarterback. Take those sort of, it plays away where you're just trying to make plays on fly, and take those away. I need to see a steady game of that, but I go with the Raiders this one as well.
All right. So far, after 4 weeks, you guys both have the Raiders 2-2. That clears up the month of September. We'll quickly go into October really quick. Week 5, they're in Indiana at Indianapolis playing the Colts. And then week 6, they're at the Titans. Link, how do you see those two games going?
I don't like the Titans game. I don't like the Titans situation for them. Indianapolis, I still think a lot to figure out. I'll give them the edge in Indy, but I don't like them in Tennessee versus Tennessee at all.
It's funny. I have the Raiders on a 3-game winning streak because I have them winning that game against Chicago. And then because of Indianapolis, I don't know what their quarterback position is going to be. Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, me, Link. I don't know who's going to be throwing the ball for them. I've got the Raiders winning that one. And Cam Ward is going to be a rookie there in Tennessee. So I think that he's going to make some rookie mistakes. I think that this is a situation that Patrick Graham and the defense can make some plays. Maybe you can get a special teams play. Can the Raiders get a kick return? I'm just asking. Can the Raiders get a kick return touchdown? Or does Jacoby Ford have to come back out of retirement to get another one? Just saying. I'm just going to throw that out. So I'd like to see some special teams plays happen at some point this season. But, yeah, I actually got the Raiders riding a 3-game winning streak right there.
Nice. And then they're in Kansas City week 7. This is the first matchup against Kansas City. Okay. Before we get to the next break, this is what we're going to answer. Link, we'll go with you first. Do the Raiders get a W in Kansas City this season?
I think they get focused on Kansas City and they win in Kansas City. This is one of the reasons why I said they lose Tennessee. They start looking ahead because after the Kansas City game, they have a bye. So, you're looking, and am I right? Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yep. So, but the thing is that this team has been focused, no matter who's at the helm, coaching or whatever, has been focused on beating Kansas City. Hasn't really happened consistently in the last decade, only one time, whatever. But the thing is that I think they get fired up for this one. They let one go last year. They get fired up, and Kansas City looks down their nose like they do so often at the Raiders, takes them lightly and gets beat.
Yeah, see, I got the Raiders losing this one in Kansas City just because, again, they're riding a 3-game winning streak, and I feel like at some point these things have to snap, and Kansas City right before the bye. I'm glad they're getting the Kansas City Chiefs before the bye, and they're not getting the Chiefs after the Chiefs bye either because the Kansas City just doesn't lose after their own bye. I actually think that the Raiders are going to beat KC in Week 18. That's just a sneak peek real quick. I think that they get their first dub at Allegiant Stadium ever against Kansas City. That'll be Week 18. Who knows what'll be on the line, but I do think that they're gonna lose right before the bye.
Yeah, drop your comments on how you see, the first 7 weeks going. Then the Raiders head into the bye week. Then the next segment, we're going to be breaking it all down as well for the rest of the schedule. So keep it locked here on the Raiders Squad Show. All right, guys. So now we got to head into November. They have a bye week, week 8. And they're going to be at home to Jacksonville. Week 9, Link, we'll go with you first. How do you see this one playing out?
I like them versus Jacksonville. I do. I like them versus Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville is still a team in somewhat slight disarray since they lost that playoff game to the Chargers. Haven't really found their way. I know that was a while ago, but in different expectations, obviously. But I do like them at Jacksonville. I like them to finally beat Jacksonville because I haven't seen it in a while. But I like it at home.
Yeah, I do as well. Trevor Lawrence, I have a lot of questions about him. Liam Cohen comes in as their new head coach. It was really weird how they even came about him being their new head coach. So I think that they're still one of those work in progress teams. It seems like they've been kind of work in progress or buffering for a very long time. So I do think that the Raiders finally get away to get a pretty nice victory over Jacksonville coming off the bye week.
All right, and then they're going to be playing their first matchup against the Broncos in Denver. Tough place to play. That's week 10.
Short week.
Yeah, it's also going to be a Thursday nighter. So,
Yep.
Short week. That means sometimes guys don't get enough rest. Q, we'll go with you first. How do you have this one going?
Again, similar to what I look at when I look at the Chargers, I feel like that the Raiders are going to split with Denver. So I had to decide which one do I think that they get, the first one or the second one. And because it is a short week, they're heading to Denver on the Thursday. I just give the edge to the Broncos. I'm interested, though, to see what Bo Nix is this year. He was better than I thought he was going to be his rookie year. But is that the ceiling? Or, do he have an opportunity to get better? Or have we seen who Bo Nix is going to be? Like, he's a big, interesting piece of this whole puzzle for the Denver Broncos. I think he does what Sean Payton wants him to do, but can he do more is going to be a question. I think by week 11 or week 10, I should say, I think the Raiders will have a good idea of who Bo Nix is going to be his sophomore year. So it really all depends on Bo Nix, but just because it's a short week in Denver, I have the Raiders losing that one.
Yeah, this is one tough one. Look, Denver's got a good defense, and Chip Kelly, I feel in this instance, is going to be pressed to put a solid game plan together with a short week and not having a lot of time, the opportunity to maybe practice or rep what you want to implement in this game. And unfortunately, with it being a short week, as Q said, versus a good defense in Denver, I have to go with the Broncos in this game, guys.
Okay, and then it's another, national televised game. This one against the Dallas Cowboys in Vegas. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Dallas jerseys at Allegiant. How do you guys have this one going? Link, we'll go with you first.
I like the Raiders here. I think the Cowboys are a disaster. Hindenburg ready to just blow up. You know what I mean? But and they've been a fireside disaster for quite some time. But I like the Raiders here. I think the energy that a lot of the Cowboy fans will bring to the Legion will fire up the Raider players to see those jerseys and really want to go out there and play a good football game. And I like the Raiders. I like their intangibles much more than I like the Cowboys. So I like the Raiders here.
It's funny. I never know what to expect from the Cowboys. I really don't. I don't know what to expect from Dak Prescott. They've got a new head coach in Brian Schottenheimer that seemed like he was a guy they just settled on at the end. So I really don't know what to expect. I think that this is one of those kind of how Lincoln started the things off talking about 50-50 games. I do think this is going to be one of those 50-50 games. I think it's going to come down to who makes the mistake, Geno Smith or Dak Prescott. Right? I feel like one of those guys is going to make a mistake. I believe I gave the slight edge when I went through this to the Cowboys in this one, just because they find a way to win 12 games and then they just implode in the playoffs and look terrible. But there would be no shock to me if the Raiders win this game. And this could be one of those, like I said, those difference makers that you look at and you're not favored going into it, but you come out winning it, and now you've got yourself a good opportunity. So I have the Raiders losing this one, but I think it's a close one.
All right, and then they're at home to the Browns week 12. I would say this when things start, getting really important, but we don't really know what the Browns are going to look like either. So Q, we'll go with you first. Do you see the Raiders winning this one at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, is it going to be Joe Flacco? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? Is it going to be Dylan Gabriel? Is it going to be Shedeur Sanders? Is it going to be Deshaun Watson? Like, what are they doing? Right. Nobody has any idea what's going on in Cleveland, including Cleveland. So yeah, there's no doubt about it. I know the Browns fans are going to travel really well. They get excited and fired up to come to Vegas, but yeah, I got the Raiders winning this one. No doubt.
I hate games like this, because these types of games, when you walk in and say, oh, yeah, the Raiders should be able to handle it. Much like it was Carolina last year, and they let a geriatric quarterback just run all over them. And the year before it was Indianapolis with another geriatric quarterback. So much to Q's point. Not sure who's going to play, but this is sometimes where these are games, guys, where you'll have a little bit of a letdown. You'll come up short. And it pains me to say this. Trust me, it pains me to say this. I just said they're going to beat the Cowboys. I think they lose to the Browns.
Ugh.
Yeah,
that hurts. It's one of those games that it bugs the hell out of me. Yeah,
you know what? I'm glad you said that, though, because that brings up a good point. That's going to be one of the biggest points to focus in on this year with the Raiders is how do they deal with success and how do they deal with adversity? Right? They didn't deal with success very well last year. They went into Baltimore and won, and then they got to the stadium and thought all they had to do was clock in for work, and the Panthers were going to lay down to them. Yeah. And the Panthers ran through them. So how do they deal with success? That's going to be one of the big questions. A lot of times over the past years, the Raiders have played up to their competition or they've played down to their competition. They have to be the standard. It doesn't matter who's, I've had many coaches tell me, Q, it don't matter if the Green Bay Packers are across from us. It don't matter who's across from us. It's always going to be about us, right? You hear Max Crosby saying it all the time. The biggest challenge he has daily is the guy that he's looking at in the mirror, right? That the Raiders have to play up to the Raiders. They can't play up and down like they have consistently over the past few years. They've got to play to a standard of their own. If Pete Carroll can get them there, then, sky's the limit for what this team could do.
Yeah, and I feel I kind of agree with Lincoln this one. I think it's going to be one of those disappointing games where we're expecting that win against Cleveland, and then it turns out to be a little bit of a dud. And then we have those conversations like, what are the Raiders doing? Because they always have one of those games. As long as it's not a game like last year against the Bengals, I'm going to be okay. All right, so let's go over now. This is the next game. This is Week 13. They're going to be in LA. That's a home game, but they have yet to win at SoFi. Right. They have yet to win at SoFi against the Chargers. How are you guys rolling with this one?
I got them getting the dub this time. I mean, as I mentioned that I have them splitting with the Chargers, splitting with the Broncos, splitting with the Chiefs. I just did, right? And so I got them beating LA in LA at SoFi for the first time. The fans always show up and do their part. Lincoln knows, right? Being on the broadcast, Raider Nation is loud and proud there at SoFi Stadium. Now it's time for the Raiders to actually reward that fan base for showing that kind of love each and every time they play there and they get that dub.
I got the Raiders getting a win there. I like them in SoFi. I like them for this game. I think, as I mentioned, they dropped the first game to the Chargers at home, but they get their revenge this time at SoFi. They find a way to get that win, get that off their hump. And I know Pete Carroll won't be talking about, his organization's never won at SoFi. I know that won't be part of it, but it'll play in some of the veterans' minds. It'll play in some of the guys like Max Crosby's mind. And of course, Max Crosby, being opposite of Khalil Mack and that defense over there wants to showcase his talents. I think a lot of guys want to do that. I think they pick the ball. I think they pick the ball off, get some turnovers, point it, make it a short field, get that Raider Nation crowd that's in Southern California, our ninth home, whatever it is, however you want to look at it. We'll get them going, and I like them to play to win the Chargers at SoFi.
Yeah, they gotta get that one in LA for sure. All right, we're gonna move on to December really quickly. They've got the Broncos Week 14. I know you guys usually have them splitting the games against the division rivals. So, Link, I believe you took the Broncos to win that first game. So
the Raiders get the revenge here. They find a way to put things together. Bo Nix becomes almost average by this time of year. You have enough film on him, and he's dumbed down a little bit, but that defense is still going to be something to deal with. I think it's still going to be strong, but I think the Raiders have gotten a rhythm now if they find a way to beat the Broncos.
Yeah, I got them beating Denver as well. And I wanted to point out in this schedule, looking at it, between weeks 11 and 14, they don't get too far away from Allegiant. Right. Dallas is at the crib, Cleveland's at the crib, then they go to LA, right, which is not too far, and then they're back at home. So if there's a time where they should feel pretty good about themselves, it should be where they're basically at the house for a month, for 4 straight weeks.
Yeah, and then they're going to have the toughest game, I think, of the season, where they go to Philly, cold weather game in Philly. Week 15, is this an L or a W? Link, we'll go with you first.
This is an L. It is a tough place to play in Philadelphia. Been there many times, and Lincoln Financial is a very tough stadium, and this is a tough crowd that's going to be in a frenzy. I don't like the Raiders' chances back in Philly.
I'm with you 100%. Jalen Hurts is a fantastic quarterback, and we saw what Saquon Barkley was able to do. Really good defense. I just think this is going to be a really tough out for the Raiders. It'll be a hell of a test, though, to see what they can do against a team like that, but I do think that they take an L this week.
This is one of the games that I'm thinking could be a potential double-digit loss if things get out of hand. This is going to be a very tough game. And then they're on the road again. They're in H-Town taking on the Texans, Week 16. Q, how do you have this one going?
This is one of those I'm going to look at as probably a slight edge to Houston in it, but I'm interested to see what CJ Stroud is year 3, right? Similar to what we talked about with the other quarterbacks in year 2. Do they take a step back? He did take a step back in year 2, right? His offensive line was terrible. He didn't, and they traded away their left tackle and Laramie Tunsil to Washington. So, they tried to rebuild it. They've drafted a couple more weapons, a couple wide receivers, as I mentioned at the top of the show, out of Iowa State. So they have some pieces coming back. Joe Mixon is still back there in the running back room. He still, I think, does a good job. But I'm interested to see what this team is. I'm not 100% sure on the Texans. So I kind of put this at a 50-50 game because it's in H-Town. I'll give the Texans the win. But this is another one of those that I can say, all right, the Raiders, if we're talking about it on Monday following the game, hey, that was a great victory. It really could be. And again, it could be one of those that leads you to, the 10th win, the double-digit win that you're looking for this season. But I have Houston winning this one.
Chantel, what's my overall record right now? What did I predict? Do you have it written down?
No, I'm writing it down as we go right now.
So
you have more than
wins
7
and losses
wins
right now. Where are we at now? What's the number at?
No, I got to count it, Link. I was just
okay. All right. The reason why I say this because this is one of those times of year that typically who wants it more ranks higher. Mm-hmm. When you have those 50-50 games, you have comparable teams. Who wants it more? And that's when it comes maybe one play here, a fumble, interception, something that turns the tide, and another team finds a way to sneak away with the win. I like Houston slightly here because I think at that particular point, Houston is still a playoff-bound team. Not sure where I was with it. I didn't keep track of where I was in wins and losses, see if the Raiders are hungry for it. This almost where you hear these announcers come out and say, oh, this is a must-win situation for if they have any playoff aspirations. There's still a little bit more season to go after this game, obviously. But this is one of those slight games where I'm on the fence. I give Houston the edge because they're at home. And they're more of a defined team than the Raiders are, in my estimation, and from what I've seen so far. But I do think this is one of those games where something goes the Raiders' way, they find a way to come off with a win. I just give the slight edge, like Hugh said, to Houston.
Yeah, and then they're going to be in New York taking on the Giants. Link, do you have them winning this one?
This one's at the house. This one's at.
This one's at home. My bad. Yeah.
This is a tough one. This is a tough one because again, to be determined. Are you playoff bound? Are you hungry for the playoffs? Knowing what you have in the final week of the season, this is a tough team. This defense can give the Raiders fit the way they are formatted right now. The Giants defense. I know there's not a whole lot of glitter or shine from them, and I know people sit there and say that, well, they don't have this. They have to put pieces together, but I do think they're going to get progressively better. This is one of those games. I'm hoping the Raiders don't have a letdown. I'm going to say they won it more because they just came off of a win. Or they may, slight loss to Houston, as I said the week before. But I think this is one of those toss-up games that worry me. It's like the Cleveland game. I'm worried. Who's going to show up? I'll give the Raiders the edge because we're at home.
Yeah, I got the Raiders winning this one. I don't know what the Giants are going to be at this stage of the game. I don't know if Brian Daboll is still going to be the head coach. I don't know if Joe Shane's going to still be the GM. I don't know if Russell Wilson is going to be the quarterback, Jameis Winston, or Jackson Dart. I'm assuming that Jackson Dart will probably be the quarterback by this stage of the game. If you look at the Giants beginning of their season, it's very difficult. So I think the first 4 games of the Giants season is probably going to be all L's, which will probably lead to Brian Daboll getting fired. If not right after that, closer to their bye week. I think that they're going to be an absolute mess, an absolute dumpster fire. They do have a really good defense, but they may be making plans for vacation already at this stage of the game. So I give the Raiders a dub here.
All right, final game in January, week 18 against the Chiefs. This one at home. Link, are you rolling with the Raiders in this one? Or are you rolling with Kansas City?
I cannot roll with the Raiders until you show me you can do it.
Yep.
It's just that simple, guys. Look, the Chiefs have had the Raiders numbers, for a while now. And the Raiders have, and even last year, the most disappointing part of that loss in last year in Kansas City was the fact that you were right there and you couldn't close it out for whatever reason. Until someone dethrones the king, I got to give the king the edge. I think Kansas City is obviously they're a better team from the success they've had over the recent years. But I also know this, they play their players. Even when they're going to playoffs, they play their players in the final week. So they're not afraid to put those guys out there. They're not going to be resting players if they're a playoff bound team, which I expect them to be in the AFC. So I can't, until I see it, I have to go with the Chiefs, unfortunately. And it really hurts my heart to say this, guys. I really wish it was different. I really wish it was different.
That's the thing about this one. I don't know what they're going to be playing for at this stage of the game. Mm-hmm. I really don't. Like, that's why these, playing the schedule game is so difficult, because we don't know what's going to be on the line for either team in week 18. They will, Kansas City, to Lincoln's point, will be playing their starters, but I don't know if they'll play them for the whole game, right? I don't know if if they can't change their seating, is it worth it to Andy Reid to put his guys out there? And then again, this could end up being a 2021 situation where the Raiders have to win on Sunday night. Maybe it's the last game of the NFL season. All eyes are on Allegiant Stadium. You win and you're in, right? I mean, there's so many different intangibles. So again, I said it earlier in the show that I'm going to give the Raiders the dub over Kansas City for the first time at Allegiant, because at some point it's a numbers game. You have to finally get a dub at home against this team. Kansas City's never lost at Allegiant, even playing in the Super Bowl. They got a dub there. So they're very comfortable playing at Allegiant Stadium. I feel like that the Raiders have to get over the hump and get that done. And it's funny, as we go through this, I feel like I gave the Raiders about 10 wins.
You gave them 10 wins, yeah. And Link gave them 9 wins.
See, and I've been very comfortable all year saying 8 to 9. So somewhere, I don't know, I persuaded myself to give them a victory that I didn't have earlier in the season. But I guess that's kind of how it happens. So there you go. I was trying to keep track in my head. And so Maybe it's this Week 18 game. I'm not 100% sure, but one of them I didn't have earlier in the season, and I gave him a dub this time. So here we go.
Q, you kept better track than me. I was like writing down WL, and they got mixed up between you and Q. But I will say that Link gave the Raiders 9 wins this season. You gave them 10. I think the Raiders are going to win between 8 to 9 games, and that's where I'm staying. Because we need to see the improvement.
That's the number I'm comfortable with too.
Yeah, because listen, we don't know how Geno and this offense is going to look. We don't know how the defense is going to look with the pieces that they're missing. It's a very young defense as well with some veterans, and I think 8, 9, 10, that's pretty comfortable. I've seen people give 13 wins, 12 wins. That's very optimistic. I love it, Raider Nation. Drop down in the comments what you think the schedule is going to be for your predictions. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to be talking about a former Raider who could possibly be back in the silver and black. All right, guys, really quickly, we got to touch on this because there's been a bunch of trade rumors and possible guys that the Raiders could get. They have about over $30 million in cap space left, I believe. What are the Raiders going to do with that? Well, there was an article put out, and it said that the Raiders should potentially try to bring back Amari Cooper. Now, this is a receiver group that has some young guys, but some guys that can, they still have high ceilings, and some young guys that I think have a lot of potential. Should the Raiders go after a receiver like Amari Cooper? Link, I'll go with you first.
No. Look, let me preface this by saying I remember when Amari was drafted. I was one of the first guys in the Raiders to interview him. I looked in his eyes and realized he didn't want to be a Raider. Not saying it a slight at him. Look, you don't have any choice a lot of times of where you're going to be drafted. He didn't enjoy his time in Oakland. That's why he couldn't wait to get out of there. He thought he found success in Dallas. And my point for Amari is he never took the next step to develop his route running skills. He is not a good route running receiver. Solid receiver when you get him in open space, but not a good route running receiver for what I think the Raiders need. I think they have something like that already on their roster. It doesn't make sense for me to say you should go out and spend money over a name. That's all it is right now. That's all Amari Cooper is a name. And I don't think they should do it. So that's my thought. Yours? Kid?
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I don't think Amari Cooper is going to be the answer. He was a really good route runner at Alabama. And I think that he took that to the NFL and said, okay, I've already established myself. Instead of continuing to get better, he just rested on what he was. He never seemed to me, and this always drove me crazy because I thought he could be an outstanding, almost an elite wide receiver if he really wanted to. It never felt like he had the drive to want to be the best. I mean, even hearing interviews that he would do and say, oh, I don't need 10 targets a game. You give me 3 or 4 targets, I'm good. Like, what wide receiver says that? You know what I mean? Like, we talk about diva wide receivers all the time. That's because they're volume. They want the volume, and that I want that. I want a guy who says, hey, feed me. I'm going to be the guy. He was always comfortable with just getting a couple targets here, a couple targets there. Okay, I did my thing. I never understood why he was never wanted to take it to the next level. So I liked him a lot coming out of Alabama. Thought he could be the next great Raiders wide receiver, but as Lincoln said, he just never took off, never really appeared like he wanted to be there, and that's unfortunate because I think he's a hell of a wide receiver, but you could tell by the different journeys and the fact that he's still a free agent kind of tells you what the rest of the league thinks about him.
See, that's the key right there. I mean, the fact that he's been a journeyman in his career, if he's that good, someone's going to keep him.
Yep.
No, don't bring him back. Don't try to, pull, put something different and call it, put some different clothes on the pig and say that it's different. It's the same guy. And I don't think he does us any good. There are many areas that I think this team needs to fill. And if they had the ability to fill it, they have the cap space to fill it, then they should take advantage of it. But Amari's not one of them.
Yeah. And, when he was coming out of Alabama, you could argue that he was the best wide receiver in that group coming out. And I think everybody was extremely excited when the Raiders got him. Of course, Link, you had that inside scoop where you looked into his eyes and you could read that, he wasn't, too hype about being in the silver and black. But I do felt like he had a decent season with, Derek Carr being his quarterback. But I felt like he never took that next step into being that elite guy. Like when we drafted him, we thought he was going to be that guy. that was
Right.
going to stick with the Raiders for a really, really long time. But I don't think this is the move for the Raiders because you got guys like Jack Besh, you got Thornton Jr. Jacoby Myers is so underrated, guys,
Right.
and so consistent. I don't think the Raiders need necessarily an Amari Cooper. And I want to ask you guys, just in terms of the receiver group, and maybe we can get into this on a later episode when we really take a look at it. But do you feel like there's a need for like a wide receiver or a number one receiver in this wide receiver group, or are you guys satisfied with the players that Spy Tech has kind of put together for this season? Q, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, I think that they're fine right now, right? Again, it hasn't even hit training camp yet, but I do believe that they're good. And I think that the Raiders think that they're comfortable right now. I think that Brock Bowers being the number one target, even though he's a tight end, that's a difference maker. If they can get Big Mike back into the mix, like I believe they can, Ian Thomas is part of the mix as well at the tight end position. You have Jacoby Myers, as you mentioned. I'm a big Jacoby Myers fan. When you have a 0.0 drop percentage from the year ago with a handful of different quarterbacks, that tells me a lot about you and your want to and your effort. And then they have other guys. They have a guy like Trey Tucker that is in a, prove who he's going to be type role. Thornton Jr., you mentioned, he can be a guy that stretches the field. There's plenty of weapons to go around. And I think one of the biggest keys, how do you use Ashton Genty out of the backfield? Is he a guy that catches the ball like he did last year at Boise State or the year before at Boise State, where they really kind of fed him the ball as a pass catcher out of the backfield? If he could be that guy as well, I think you have plenty of weapons to go around. Now, you might get into training camp and realize, yeah, okay, these guys aren't developing as quickly as like. Let's go out and look for a veteran like a Keenan Allen, like maybe a Amari Cooper, whatever you say, whoever's out there available. But I don't think that there's any sense of urgency right now.
The Raiders have not had in quite some time a true possession receiver, a true go-to guy, 3rd down and 6, is going to get open. I think that is yet to be defined with this team. I like this young group, and I like this young group to develop a little bit more. I would like Jacoby Myers to develop his route running a little bit more specifically. Sometimes he's a little sporadic. He's been good, obviously, when the ball comes his way of catching it, but he's got to find a way to get open. There are guys that I've seen in the past, especially with the way the rules are with the NFL, the amount of space that's open in the middle field, find ways to get open. And that's a knack that's learned over time in play. It comes in absolutely crucial when you're in the red zone. And I don't think the Raiders have that yet. With that being said, I think it's yet to come because I do think you have some young talent that can develop into that area. You just have to find a way to create that chemistry between quarterback, receiver, as well as complementing them with the play calling Chip Kelly's going to be doing. So I think that has yet to be seen. But for the most part, I like the Raiders wide receiver room because what I expect them to do with the running game and the short passing game, I think that exemplifies what they have and their tight ends and everything else. I like where they are. I don't think wide receiver is an overall a need for this team, but you need to have these young guys develop into their own specific brain or how they can add to this, this whole complete picture.
Yeah, I think the name Amari Cooper sounds like, okay, that might be a sexy name to bring back on the team.
Yeah.
Right. Because it is a guy that has been somewhat reliable, but then kind of disappears in big games and, might not be able to show up. And I think with the Raiders and the group that they have, there's so much talent. And Brock Bowers is essentially a wide receiver. Like, let's be real, right?
No
like
doubt.
he's got the hands of a Jerry Rice, you guys.
Right.
Let's be real. You kind of mentioned something interesting, like the Raiders haven't had that receiver for a little while. Like, I think within the past, 10 years or so, my favorite Raider receiver, and I think he's more known as a 49er, was Michael Crabtree.
Yeah.
Right. I think for me, I think for me, he was probably the most consistent and reliable for the Raiders, made big plays. But I think these young guys have a pretty good chance. Now, before we get away from it, because they're not going, and maybe we'll get to this on the next episode, but because they're probably not going to go for a wide receiver, where if you're the Raiders and you're Spy Tech, where would you kind of look to when you want to add? Would it be the secondary over the offense? Would you look more to the defense? Where would you want to add a piece? Link, we'll go with you first.
Defensive line and offensive line. I think you need to create depth and consistency because we don't know what's going on with Wilkins. I think you need more depth at defensive line. You got to complement that rotation to help Max Crosby and your outside ends stay free. You got to find some way to get the interior 3 to double team to allow Max and Tyree Wilson or Malcolm Kuntz, whomever is on the other edge, to free up one-on-one, to beat one-on-one because they got to get there in a hurry. So I think defensive interior is one of the things I would focus on, and overall just depth for offensive linemen.
Yep.
Offensive linemen get banged up all the
Yeah.
time. And because we still have the intangible, we don't know what's going on with Colton Miller. We still have the intangible, we don't know what, the other players playing together, and it's a young group relative and in the inside. You got to create depth on offensive line. Absolutely essential for you pushing forward.
Yeah, no, I'd agree 100% with that. I would look and say cornerback as well, but as we talked about on previous shows, where are you going? Who are you going to go at? Are you just going to add a body to add a body? I don't think that that's the right approach to it, right? And I know that Stephon Gilmore is still out there, and I know he's a guy that a lot of people, still gravitate to, but he's going to cost quite a bit of money still at this stage of the game. And I think that you slow down the young guys' development. So I agree with Big Link. The more depth you have at the offensive line is the better. And, and then, of course, you have to have an eye on the defensive line as well, especially that defensive tackle position, since we don't know what's going on with Christian Wilkins. That's going to be one of those big storylines to follow, going throughout the course of training camp. When is he out there? When is he available? Is he out there? Is he available? What's going to happen with Big Christian? Because they need him out there as well.
And just another added little caveat. I know a lot of people out there are thinking, well, where are you going to go in free agency for an offensive or defensive lineman? It's not about that. Here's the thing that I would pay attention to because of this time and where we are in the season. Watch training camp. After training camp, guys that might fall through the cracks, guys that might have had some good film in the past, that might be a solid backup. You're not looking to pick up a starter.
Right.
That's not really a possibility.
Right.
When starters are taken, but you're looking to pick up a solid backup or one of these guys that I call as a try hard. Might not have the name, might not have all the backing, but might be a good solid pick. That might be a good utility player. Because right now, until you decide if the Raiders do already have it, and I don't know they do or not, have their starting on both sides of the ball, offensive, defensive line. If you have your starters, somebody could come in and play sparingly if one of the guys are down and play solid. I'm not asking you to be a star. You might develop into a star, but I'm not asking you to be a star. I want you to play solid because I need that body and I need that mindset to help my team push along. We're in a tough period. Our guy just went guard. Our left guard just went down for a couple of weeks. I don't know when I'm going to get him back. Do I have somebody I can put in, or is it going to be a hole to where I have to adjust my protection and everything else? So that's where my thinking is coming when I say offensive and defensive line. You have the money to spend, so that means you can go out there and get yourself a veteran. He doesn't have to be dirt cheap, but you're not necessarily looking for a starter. You're looking for a guy who could provide depth to your either your offensive or defensive line. That's my philosophy.
And Raider Nation, the breakdown doesn't get any better than that with, of course, Lincoln Kennedy and Q Myers. And Link, I knew you were going to say maybe they should also look at the O-line because you're right. Like that.
I'm that guy.
that was very on brand. That was very on brand. But nonetheless, Raider Nation, thank you so much for joining us this morning for the Raiders Squad Show. Remember, if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also drop your comments because obviously we will be reading those if you have any thoughts on anything. And we'll be back on Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time if you're, a Raiders fan on the East Coast. Thanks so much for rocking with us this morning. We'll be back. Hope you enjoyed the show, and thanks so much.